Hello, this is Dan with Orbital Guitars, and welcome to part 1 of this guitar build that I'm calling Bob 1.5. If you know, you know. Anyway, I'm starting by using my table saw to rip a Wenge board down into 3 pieces, then gluing those back together to make a 3-piece neck through blank. Why not just use a thicker Wenge board for 1-piece neck? Well, there are a few reasons, the simplest of which is that I already had this Wenge board and didn't want to go buy a new one if I didn't have to, but also because multi-laminate necks are generally more stable than one-piece necks, and because doing it this way has slightly less wastage. Once the neck blank is glued up, I run it through my planer to flatten and square up the top and bottom surfaces. With that done, my next step is to route the truss rod channel. I'll start by drilling a hole at each end of what will be the truss rod channel, and I drill these holes for 2 reasons. The first is that it clearly marks the endpoints so that I don't route a channel that is too long or too short. The second is that it creates an easy access point for the router bit so that I can simply lower the bit into the hole rather than having to plunge the bit directly into the wood, since my router base is not designed for that. Now, because my neck blank is still square, I simply use a guide fence attachment on the router to route the channel in a straight line. Once that channel is routed, I'll follow up with a chisel to make the head end a bit wider and a bit deeper because the nut on the end of the truss rod is bigger than the rest of the truss rod and needs the extra room. Then I'll do a quick test fit to make sure that the channel depth is correct. Next, I start working on the fretboard, which for this build is multi-scale, so there are a few extra steps. I start with the longer scale length that I'll be using, in this case 660mm or about 26 inches, and I mark out all of its fret locations. Then I need to identify my parallel fret, that is, the one fret that has the same angle as it would on a standard fretboard. In this build I chose the 9th fret to be the parallel fret. The most common parallel frets are the 7th, 9th, or 12th frets, or in the case of 6-string Strandberg guitars, it's actually the nut that's parallel while all of the frets are angled. Once I know the position of that fret on the long side, I'll use a square to mark the fret all the way across the fretboard so that I'll know its location on the other side. Then I'll take the fret ruler for my shorter scale length, in this case 25 inches, and line up its 9th fret position with the line that I drew across from the first side. After that, I mark out all of the fret positions on the short side, and then use a ruler to connect the marks from each side together to get my fan fretboard. With all the fret positions marked out, I can take the fretboard to my bandsaw and cut the taper and remove the excess from both ends. This is a beautiful streaky flamed ebony fretboard. With the taper cut roughly close to its final size, I will now cut in the fret slots. When I cut fret slots by hand, I like to make an initial cut at both edges of the fretboard, as I find that this helps me to keep the cut straight and in the proper place. Once all the fret slots are cut, I'll position the fretboard exactly where I want it to be, and then drill a couple of holes for locating pins that will keep it in place during the glue up. Speaking of glue ups, I start by taping over the truss rod to prevent glue from dripping into its channel, cut away the excess tape, dry test the locating pins, put some extra tape down that will make cleanup easier, spread the glue, set the fretboard in place, and clamp it up. After the glue dries, I can cut away the excess from the neck blanks so that it will be easier to handle going forward. And before someone gets worked up about how much I'm cutting away here after I said that thing about less wastage earlier, I should point out that this is a double neck blank, meaning that I made it in the right dimensions to get 2 headless neck through blanks out of it. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention earlier that this guitar is headless. Cutting the taper to match the fretboard. And roughly cutting the headstock shape. I probably should have switched to the narrower bandsaw blade instead of using the resaw blade. Using the spindle sander to refine that headstock shape a bit. One of the downsides of this particular ebony board is that it had some cracks and small voids in it, so I filled those in with a bit of superglue and ebony dust. Once those voids are filled, I get to make some new voids, but these ones are for inlays. I use a 3/32 rotor bit in my Dremel with a precision rotor base attachment on it to route out the bulk of the inlay space, then follow that with a 3/64 bit to get it closer to its final shape, and then finish it with some chisels and knives. For this inlay, this was the first time that I worked entirely with mother of pearl, or in this case gold mother of pearl, and I thought I would try and get a little tricky with it. Because the mother of pearl pieces I have are mostly too small for some of the pieces of this inlay to be cut from a single piece, I decided to cut each inlay out of multiple small pieces so that the whole thing would be like a mosaic of seam lines instead of one or two awkward seam lines where larger pieces of mother of pearl would have been necessary. This made for a lot of extra work in sawing out lots of tiny inlay pieces. And as if the main inlay wasn't enough, I decided to do these additional inlays at the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 15th, 17th, 19th, 21st, and 24th frets, though luckily for me, all of these are simple straight lines with the fret slots as endpoints. I used a drop of superglue to hold each of these in place, then use a knife to mark out where to route. I also switched up the inlays from the bass side to the treble side above the 12th fret, and had a double on the 24th fret. With all the inlays glued in, I use a leveling beam to sand them all flush with the surface of the fretboard. And after that, I'm ready to radius the fretboard. I'm giving this one a 14-inch radius. After radiusing, the fret slots need some additional work. The end of each slot needs to be cut to the appropriate depth for the fret tangs, and some slots need to have super glue cleared out of them, and in some places there was a bit of pearl that needed to be cut as well. At this point I decided to drill for the truss rod access at the knot headstock, and had to be careful about my drilling angle so that the drill wouldn't pop out of the front. And that's going to bring us to the end of part 1 of this guitar build. Social media links are in the description, as well as my business email and a link to my reverb shop where you can find any of my guitars that are currently up for sale, and some guitar body design and routing templates for those who may be interested in building their own versions of my designs. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for the next installment.